Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the players you're going to need to know across the conference in the Big Ten. There's a whole lot of them, especially some transfer wide receivers I found is going to be a big theme in that conference this upcoming year. A lot of them got to hit big, I'll tell you that much. But let's get into some superlatives and my championship pick for this conference. It's a tough conference to put together. I won't lie to you. I think there's a lot of different teams that you could pick for a lot of these, especially for surprise team of the year. I think there's about 5 or 6 different teams that you could place into that, and I would not really argue with you, but we're going to start with game of the year. It's Ohio State, Penn State. I don't think there's any question here. This is the game of the year. It's going to be an incredible game. I don't care what time of day it is. These are the two best teams in the conference. This is Penn State's moment. And for lack of a better term, this is the moment that Penn State could take over the conference, could become the team that they've wanted to be over there for quite some time. And it would be a huge moment in the sun. They got to be able to put it together and put it together before that, because this is going to be a very, very tough game. Ohio State likely is towards a finished product, if not a finished product at this point, and you're looking at two teams that will probably be in the top 5 teams in the country going at it with everything on the line, whether it's a Big Ten title berth, a CFP berth possibly for one of these teams, especially if Ohio State has lost that Texas game in week 1. There's a lot riding on this game for not only this season, but the future of this conference. If Penn State wins this one, possibly goes undefeated, takes over this conference, maybe some of the scales tip just a little bit more in the Nittany Lions direction than the Oregon and Ohio State direction has been over the last couple of years. The underrated game of the year, or the game that I think a lot of people should watch out for, is Illinois at Indiana on September 20th. I think this sets the tone in a lot of ways for this conference, because I think everyone's looking for that 4th team. Now, when you look back at last year, you had 4 teams. You had the 3 teams up top, and you had Indiana. I think a lot of people are kind of writing off Indiana in some respects, but I do think this game will have a lot to do with who that 4th team is. Obviously, USC, Iowa, a couple of these other teams in Michigan will have something to say about that. These are the 2 best candidates, at least in my mind, for that 4th team going into the season. I think it's going to be a huge game, especially on September 20th, where you're not really a finished product. You haven't put everything fully together. Who wins that game? At Indiana, going to be a massive one for this season. And I think whoever comes out on top in that one could have a chance to go to the CFP. Whoever loses that one is going to be walking a big-time tightrope the rest of the season, and I think could be looking at a very, I don't want to say disappointing, but at least missing the CFP and kind of falling down a little bit further than you would have liked to this season. My disappointing team of the year is Illinois, and I kind of hate to say it. It's a very, very fun team. I really like Brett Bielema. I love Luke Altmaier. I think they have some really good players. I don't see an elite weapon. I like the addition they made. Excuse me, now I'm trying to remember his name, of Hudson Clement from West Virginia. I don't know if he can do everything you need him to do. I think he can do some really incredible things, and he's going to be a great player for you. You're going to need more than that. And I think losing L.J. McCray to Georgia was absolutely massive. I think it's one of those teams that's going to play good football. I think in those big-time games, it's just not going to be quite enough for the Illini to do what they want to do, which is make a CFP run this year. My surprise team of the year is the Washington Huskies, and I thought about putting Nebraska here. I thought about putting Michigan State here with Aiden Childs. But Washington's going to be really fun. Damon Williams is a really, really special player. Denzel Boston on the outside. Jonah Coleman in the backfield. You bring in Takario Davis. It's going to be a really good team. And they have all the ability in the world. And we saw what Jed Fish did a couple of years ago with Noah Fafita and all the talent around him. This is a more talented team than that Arizona team was. Obviously, you're in a tougher conference, so that makes things a little bit more complicated, but this team has all the upward mobility in the world. I would not be surprised at all if this was a 10-win team and you found them in the CFP at the end of the year. So we'll find out if that's actually what I pick here at the end of the week, but I do think Washington is a really special team this year that can find their way back on track after a very weird year with a lot of change. Freshman of the year to me just has to be DeCorian Moore. I really don't see anyone else that is going to be called on as much to be their guy as DeCorian Moore, because I think he's going to have to be wide receiver 1, as crazy as that sounds. Now, Gary Bryant Jr. could definitely take that. Kylo Casper maybe could factor into that role, but DeCorian Moore is going to be the guy that I think they're going to have to unlock throughout the season. And maybe it does become a situation where you've lost 1 or 2 games in the middle of October and you're just saying, let's get this guy as ready to go as we can for 2026 because this is a special athlete. Could be and probably will be, at least in my eyes, one of the best wide receivers in the country in the future. He very well could be that this year. I think he's a very, very special player, and in the Oregon offense, those wide receivers tend to have a lot of space to run. When you give that to Decoria Moore, he tends to do some really special things with it. So I think Decoria Moore is going to be the freshman of the year in this conference. There's plenty of other really good choices, but none of them are going to be asked to do what this guy's going to be asked to do this year. For transfer of the year, I'm going to go Fernando Mendoza over at Indiana. I think he's going to put together a really nice season. I don't know if it's going to be, Heisman level or it's going to be even CFP level like they had a year ago. I do think he's a more talented quarterback than what they had a year ago with Curtis Rourke. I think he has a little bit more of that upward mobility. He definitely has a little bit more just mobility in general. He's a guy that absolutely can run the rock, and I think he's someone that just brings that team a little bit more from the quarterback position than they had a year ago. Not to say Curtis Rourke was limited in any way, but just to say Fernando Mendoza, I think, is a very legit NFL talent at quarterback, and I think a lot of scouts will be watching very closely for this kid. I think he's going to play some really good football for them. I don't know what the end result will be, but I do know they're going to be very, very happy with the investment they made in Fernando Mendoza. Offensive player of the year I played around with just a little bit. I thought about putting Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. I thought about putting maybe a Mekhi Hughes over at Oregon. It's Jeremiah Smith. This is the best player in the conference. I'm really not going to overthink this one. I know it's a little bit down the middle, but this is a guy that's going to make every play in the world, and he's going to get the ball very consistently, even with Carnell Tate and Brandon Ennis and Bryson Rogers like we talked about earlier. This guy's always going to be on the field. They're always going to find matchups for him in. If Julian Sayin or Lincoln Kienholz is the guy that I think a lot of us expect them to be, Jeremiah Smith's going to get the ball plenty, and frankly, I think he can overshadow the quarterback there just a little bit and take kind of that offensive player of the year from him. So I don't know exactly what the numbers will be. I know that in his freshman year he had, I believe, 1,300 yards. He could very well go for 1,500 this year. As crazy as that sounds with that room, I think he's just uniquely talented, one of the best football players we have seen in college football in a very long time. Defensive player of the year, I'm going to go with Denai Dennis Sutton. And I think there's a number of options across the conference here, whether you want to go Mateo Uyunglele, you go Caleb Downs over at Ohio State. I think this kid's a difference maker, and I think the guys around him have everything to do with this as he does because Zane Durant's on that line. Zariah Fisher is on that line. You're not going to have the ability to really double this guy. Now, he'll get plenty of chips from running backs and tight ends, and they'll do everything they can to slow him down. It's going to be really hard to do that. I think he's one of those really true difference makers on this defense and is one of those guys that we saw him make big-time plays down the stretch of last season. I think he just tears the roof off this year. I don't know if it's Abdul Carter levels of play, but I do think he makes a number of big-time plays for this team, especially with a team that I think is going to be relatively good on the back end and be really good at stopping the run. He's going to be able to pin his ears back and get after quarterbacks, and I think he's going to be really special at doing that this year. For Coach of the Year, it's going to go with my surprise team in Jedd Fisch. Really thought about Matt Rule here, but I'm going to go with Jedd Fisch. I think with all of the changes that happened up there in Seattle over the last couple of years, he shouldn't be back on the page this quickly, but I think he will be. I really do think this team is talented enough, and he has the mind, and offensive mind especially, to put this thing together the way that he needs to in year 2 up there. And that is a very, very hard thing to do, especially when you consider all of the things that walked out the door at a program that's not necessarily in Alabama. They're not a Georgia. They're not, one of these programs that's just expected to reload right away. Jedd Fisch has done a really, really good job of trying to reload. Obviously, Washington is not a bottom feeder, but at the end of the day, they're in a position that I don't think a lot of people, including myself, expected them to be in this short after Kalen DeBoer moving on. They made the right hire. They got the right quarterback in there, and I think it's going to be a really special season for this coach and this football team this year. As for my championship game matchup, I think we're getting a rematch. I think we're getting Ohio State, Penn State. I think these two teams will go at each other 2 times during this season, and I think it's going to be really fun. I think it's going to be 2 of the best quarterbacks in the country by then, regardless of who the Ohio State quarterback is. I tend to believe that's going to be the case. I think Drew Allar is going to be playing whatever level of football he's going to be playing. It's very hard to know what Drew Allar is going to be throughout this year, but at the end of the day, we'll know going into that game who he is and how he's going to perform in that one because they will have played before. So I think it's going to be a really fascinating game. Penn State has everything in front of them, and I might just pick them in that very first matchup against Ohio State. I'm not picking them in this one, though. I'm going to pick Ohio State to get back on top of this conference for the first time in a long time. As you can see in that picture, that is a clean-shaven Ryan Day. He is no longer clean-shaven. He has a full beard. It has been a very long time since they've been on top of that conference. That's Chase Young right next to him. So there is a lot that Ohio State has not accomplished over the last little bit. Obviously, the national title trumps all of that. They want to get back on top of this conference, and I think they will this year. It's one of those picks that you feel confident in because you know who Ohio State is, and then you look back at the last couple of years and you think, maybe they won't get it done. But I am going to pick Ohio State. Might be a little bit down the middle, but I think they have the most talent in the entire conference. I love the coaching staff, even with all the changes. I think they're going to be more than fine. Love the running back duo, C.J. Donaldson and James Peoples, that I promise we'll talk about throughout the season. And I just think that wide receiver core is just too darn good to be held down. So I think Ohio State gets it done. I think they win the Big Ten this year. I don't know if they run the table. They might have another 10-2 type season in them. I think they get to the Big Ten title. I think they win it. And I think that at the very least, they're one of the top couple of seeds going into the CFP, which we'll break down on Friday. I can promise you that. But that'll do it for this prediction show on the Big Ten. Very interesting conference. One of those that feels a little bit more crystalline than all these other conferences. That tends to be when things go a little bit crazy. So we'll find out what happens this year. I'm betting on Washington to have a big year. Kind of betting on Nebraska to have a big year, which sounds kind of crazy coming out of my mouth, but I do believe in them. I do think they're going to do something pretty special. And it's going to be an awesome conference. It's going to be so interesting to watch all this unfold. Illinois, Indiana have insane expectations. Michigan with one of the more talented kids that they've had at quarterback in a very long time over there. We'll see how all this unfolds. It's going to be an awesome conference. And tomorrow we'll get to the SEC, a conference that is so weird. I think there is not a team that separates in any respect in that conference. I think there's 4 teams at the top. There's probably 9 teams that could possibly win that conference next year. And I'll talk about it all tomorrow. I promise you that. But thank you so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, comment, do all of that good stuff. Does mean the world to me. Really helps out what I'm doing here. And at the end of the day, we'll talk about the SEC tomorrow. Hopefully, I'll have a good pick for that one, which is a very weird conference. But thank you once again for tuning in, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.